So, Indomitable Creativity has transformed from a niche deck to a powerhouse of the format. So, how would Merfolk even go about beating it? Well, the main game plan of the deck is to play Indomitable Creativity, targeting a token to get an Archon of Cruelty out, yet that game plan can differ somewhat. Now, take note that Indomitable Creativity is a really red-intensive card, so cutting off extra mana sources like Wren 6 might delay its creativity, and Seize effects are also good at keeping the red sources down. Seize effects also slow down their ability to get dwarf tokens, so that is another bonus. Now, Archon of Cruelty conveniently has 6 toughness, meaning it is just out of reach from a Dismember, yet Dismember is still able to kill an Archon of Cruelty when it is brought into play with Persist, and it is useful to kill any tokens being targeted with Indomitable Creativity, so it fizzles. Now, speaking of that, let's imagine you're at a healthy life total, and your opponent plays Indomitable Creativity for 1, targeting that dwarf token. If you have Dismember and Force Negation in hand, which one do you use to fizzle the Indomitable Creativity? In most cases, you should use Dismember when creativity is on 1, because if they play Indomitable Creativity for 2 or more, Force Negation will be better suited then, and Force Negation can be suited to deal with other threats your opponent plays in the future. Now, it is worth sacrificing a few creatures to Vidalian Hexcatcher to counter their creativity, yet what about their other threats, such as Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, Prismari Command, and Wren 6? Well, it really depends. If it only takes 1 Merfolk sacrifice to counter any of these, then it's probably the right play, yet if your opponent is lacking red mana, then you should go harder after Wren, and if you have a really large board state, then I would try to counter all of these with Hexcatcher. Now let's say they get an Archon of Cruelty out, and you have to start sacrificing creatures, or you need to sacrifice creatures to Vidalian Hexcatcher. What are the best to sack? Well, Silvergill Adept is by far the best card to sack because you already got value with it, and now it is just a body. Now after that, I would sack Trickster or Harbinger because you already got value with them, but you should sacrifice Silvergill Adept before them because it has 1 less toughness. Then it gets a little bit murkier when it comes to sacrificing these, because if your opponent is a little tighter on mana, you shouldn't sacrifice Tideshaper, but if they're fine on mana, it isn't a bad idea. After that, you should sacrifice Lords, and I would sacrifice Island Walk Lords before sacrificing Vidalian Hexcatcher, and then I would sacrifice Swaylun. And somehow I forgot to mention Cursecatcher at the beginning. If your opponent has a lot of mana out, then it is a good card to sack, yet if they have been at 4 or less lands for a bit, then I would keep it on the field because of the opportunity to counter Indomitable Creativity. Now, I would like to talk about using Force Negation versus Wren 6. Now, there's a lot of factors that may vary this play, since if you have a decent board to deal with Wren in a turn, then you can let it resolve, yet if they have a super controlling hand and not too many threats, then I would force it, and being on the draw or play can impact this decision. So if you are thinking about countering a turn 2 Wren, I think the main determining factor is if you have a solid answer for the Indomitable Creativity afterwards. Hey, but before you click off the video, I want to remind you that I have a new YouTube channel out. Check it out if you want, but as always, I will see you next time.